We are getting very close to a significant global event that will change everything. That might come off as a, clickbait statement or, he's trying to get clicks or he's trying to get people to watch this. But no, we are getting very, very close to a significant global event, which will usher in a new system, a new financial system. And I think that it all really kind of stems back to 2022 with the sanctions, and even prior to that, going all the way back to like 2008. But we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to address in this video. So sit back, relax. Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. So let's first start off with the trade war, the tariffs, right? So recently, there was a back and forth between, China and the US. And the US has been very vocal, specifically the Chinese embassy in the US have been very vocal about what's happening here. And you could tell that there's a big significant reaction to the tariff discussions that the US is starting to really kind of say to, China. So we have here, give the bully an inch, he will take a mile. In the face of US hegemony and bullying, remember this. So again, we could start to kind of see the back and forth battle here, the pressure heating up. And this is because China raised tariffs on the US imports to 125%. Now, this was also after we raised tariffs to 145% on Chinese goods. So again, we're starting to see the trade war and the tariff discussions escalating between some significant nations. Now, when it comes to China, I mainly look at the BRICS, and I look at how the BRICS have been reacting since the sanctions. And what we've been witnessing is a big pushback on the US dollar. And I actually expect this to continue. I think that we are in the age of de-dollarization. And a lot of people say, oh, well, it's nothing to worry about. And the thing about that is that it's nothing to worry about yet. But I do think that we will get to the point where we should be worried about de-dollarization efforts. But first and foremost, I want to actually talk about what the big players are saying, aka BlackRock. So BlackRock recently stated that there will be much greater inflation in the United States. Now, this was also tied back to what Larry Fink was mentioning on CNBC, where he was saying that the US is very close to a recession and may even be in one now. We have fears of an economic slowdown have risen sharply since President Donald Trump unveiled widespread tariffs last week, sparking a sell-off in the stock market. I think you're going to see across the board just a slowdown until there's more certainty, and we now have a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs. That means longer, more elevated uncertainty. Despite his concerns about the economy, the BlackRock CEO said that he did not think the US was in a financial crisis and that mega trends in the economy like artificial intelligence would persist. Now, the thing that I actually want to mention here is that we changed the definition of recession. All right, before it was 2 GDP quarters of negative growth, and we already got that. In fact, we got it like, I want to say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, actually. It was like back in 2022, beginning of like 2023. And if we're thinking about that, ever since that point, what have we been witnessing? We have been witnessing a lot of pain around specific sectors. Banks, for example, back in 2023 started to close up, and a lot of people still say, well, it was mainly crypto banks. It actually wasn't. There was a lot of regional banks that were also closing doors as well during that time. So, obviously it hit the banks in a big way. Now, during that time, we really didn't notice too much of that because, crypto was still going, parabolic because Bitcoin had an inverse reaction to the big banks actually closing. But now today, as we start to hear talks about a recession, everyone's like, well, haven't we been in one? Because even now, if we think about a recession, I'm sure that there's a lot of you out there saying, well, we've already been in one. We've been, saying that we've been in a recession for a while now. Because again, they already changed the definition of a recession. It's very similar to inflation as well, like CPI data. I've always stated that they're lying to us with the CPI data because they don't actually account for utilities, like the cost of utilities, the cost of gas, even half the, things that we need, like food. Most of that's not actually calculated into the CPI data. So at the end of the day, like most of what we are now witnessing around the economy is all fake. And they actually learned how to falsify a lot of that data because of 2008. But today, as we do really kind of hear these recession talks and these discussions, we look back on this video that was posted from Anderson. Now, a lot of people will say, well, this was 6 years ago, because again, this was 2019. This was April 10th of 2019. I bring this up not because, oh, it's old news, but I want you guys to understand that these crises that have hit these markets, time and time again, you can go back to the beginning ones before the internet even existed. All of these big crises, we typically have something ushered in. They are an accelerant for any big change. We have here, nothing happens until a global crisis arrives. Check this out.
I would say if you look back in history, the times at which a dominant currency was displaced, it was always a bit of an accident that brought it. It's not like a smooth trend that eventually brings it to parity. Something happens in the world, it's a crisis, it's a war, and that catalyzes a major change. So these processes, I think, are probably going to be very nonlinear. At the same time, I think it's hard to imagine that it would happen in the next couple of years. It's clearly something that's a bit in the future.
Well, let's hope we can reach to that state without a war. That would be really, really hope.
So obviously, yes, the biggest crises that have hit these markets time and time again, and I'm not just talking about crypto, right? I'm talking about the stock market, financial markets themselves. They don't go, unnoticed. Like, for example, there's been quotes in the past that have, stated, don't let a good crisis go to waste. That's what they've stated time and time again in the past. 2008 was a big accelerator for major innovations happening around the system, but a lot hasn't been solved during that time. Like, if we go all the way back to 2008, a lot of the problems that were there still persist even today. The fractional reserve banking system, as we know it, is a big scam, and it's actually a big accelerator of these crises that do happen. But on top of that, one thing that I've stated on this channel is that since 2008 to now, we actually haven't fixed anything. Like, yeah, sure, there's been slight innovations happening with ISO 20022 being adopted in, some changes happening around payment apps with UI, but the underlying rails and everything, outside of, just basic upgrades, nothing really has changed significantly because we actually haven't had a massive crisis hit these markets. So that's why we're thinking that a big crisis is probably going to be hitting these markets at some point in time. A global event is something that we're looking at. Now, we already kind of have the environment around this, if you think about it. Okay, like for example, I've been watching the dollar collapse over the last couple weeks, and technically it's since going all the way back to January 13th. But on top of this, I've also been watching gold go parabolic. Now, we know that the dollar crashing is very bullish for risk on assets, but the question is, why is gold skyrocketing? Typically, gold skyrockets when something breaks. If we zoom out in time, okay, and we go back to 2008, this was gold in 2008. It was skyrocketing off of the lows. And this is gold now, skyrocketing off of the lows. So something big is going to hit these markets within the next 12 months, I would say 12, 24 months, give or take. And a lot of people are now focused on this. Like, for example, we have the Coinbase letter saying gold prices are flying off the chart. If you can't tell, something is broken. And even Gold Telegraph did put out a post, and this is actually regarding the Fed. We have breaking news: the Federal Reserve would absolutely be prepared to deploy its firepower to stabilize financial markets. There we go. New GT conversation coming out soon. The U.S. Central Bank prepared to act with various tools, Susan Collins says. Now, what tools are those? Well, it's the printer press. They want to print more money. We have over here the Federal Reserve absolutely ready to help stabilize market if needed, top official says. The U.S. Central Bank prepared to act with various tools. Now, again, they are trying to tell us that we're not seeing any liquidity concerns overall and that the markets are continuing to function well. But she said the central bank does have the tools to address concerns about market functioning or liquidity if they should arise. We have had to deploy quite quickly various tools, she told Financial Times, referring to past interventions to address chaotic conditions in markets. We would absolutely be prepared to do that as needed. And this kind of reminds me, so again, this is something that got unnoticed. back in 2023 when the banks actually started to collapse. Japan was actually under a lot of stress during that time. And if you guys do remember, their currency was starting to collapse. What happened? Well, the Fed bailed Japan out. Now, if that sounds wild, it's because it is, because Japan is the largest holder of US debt. So we bailed out the largest holder of US debt because they were close to collapse. Now, that was back in 2023. Today, it's no different. We still see Japan under a lot of stress, especially even with the tariff discussions now and the trade war accelerating. But on top of that, we also got a big update from CNBC, and this was actually on the 11th. Fed's Kashkari says rising bond yields, falling dollar show investors are moving on from the US dollar. It's almost as if the Fed is actually telling us the truth for once. But what's interesting about this is I put out a post regarding something similar to this and how the US will counteract this. Because again, we go back to the beginning statement here, which was China raises tariffs on US imports to 125%. These nations, like China, you look at all the BRICS, right? All of these nations are done using the dollar. And it's because what the US does it significantly impacts their fiat currency as well. And a lot of people have called this bullion. Russia has called it bullion. China's calling it bullion. We've been hearing these talks about, moving away from the US dollar and the US financial system for years now. And we mainly go back to 2022. Now, I did say collapse the old to usher in the new. We just witnessed an acceleration like no other into the new system, and it was spearheaded by the Trump admin. The trade war, very similar to the 2022 sanctions, just gave all other countries another reason to fast track their anti-dollar initiatives. And again, I do look at the China tariffs because I do think that this is going to accelerate the pushback against the dollar. The BRICS have been openly developing blockchain-based payment systems and even their own digital currencies. De-dollarization might seem like a buzzword that's used for clicks, but it's been happening since 2008. Most of the BRICS countries started stockpiling massive amounts of gold from 2008 to now. They are well positioned for the reset at this stage. Death of 1,000 cuts is how I describe the fall of the US dollar, but Trump has a wild card up his sleeve, stablecoins. We have been hearing a lot of heavy discussions around using stablecoins to keep the dollar the reserve currency. How will this work exactly? Well, first, we start by accelerating stablecoin legislation, which is currently happening in the US. Most of the stablecoin market is USD denominated, anyways, which promotes dollar dominance, but legislation is the key. This will significantly open the floodgates to stablecoins growing at rates we have never seen before. Then we openly embrace stablecoins for payments with the largest US institutions and banks on board. The biggest secret, though, is US debt. We have always been searching for a buyer of our debt, but now we have a real solution. Issuers of stablecoins are slowly but surely becoming the largest holders of treasuries, i.e. US debt. Trump's recent executive order also confirms they are accelerating the expansion of the USD stablecoin market. The sovereignty of the United States dollar, including through actions to promote the development and growth of lawful and legitimate dollar-backed stablecoins worldwide. This is them stating that they will do anything to back and support US dollar stablecoin issuers. Because again, he knows, as much as we know, that major players like Tether are becoming the largest holders of treasuries. The new system is becoming extremely clear at this point. Everything is moving on the chain. And stablecoins are a big focus point because they are tokenized fiat. Every single fiat currency in the entire FX market itself will live on chain. Retail will be using stablecoins while central bankers use CBDCs backed by gold. Now is the best time to lock in and focus on what's happening around the financial system. Everything is in an accelerated stage and it's only going to speed up more and more. Prepare accordingly, which is why we think about, what really accelerates the big shift. And that is a crisis. And I feel like it's brewing behind the scenes right now. And don't get me wrong, I do think that prices will probably have another big spike in the market. I think that we go on another tear before we have a, crisis hit. But I do think that one is brewing behind the scenes. But what is very interesting about the stablecoin initiative side is what better time? Like, what better time than now for the US to embrace stablecoins when you have players like Ripple that have recently launched a US dollar backed stablecoin? And for those out there, including XRP holders that are saying, well, oh, it's very bullish for Ripple, but it sucks for XRP holders. We already know that, Ripple president Monica Long highlighted how complementary the role of XRP is and how RLUSD will actually support XRP as well. So again, when we think about this, it's very beneficial for the network. It's very beneficial for XRP. But what better time than now when you have a lot of these big players, like even PayPal, launching US dollar denominated stablecoins? I think that this is the secret weapon. I think that when we think about the big push happening, the global event that's going to usher us into this new system, could it be a war? Sure, it could be. Could it be a cyber attack? It 100% could be. We don't know what it's going to be. We just know that one is brewing. But I do think that it is going to lead to a financial collapse similar to 2008, if not worse. And then from the ashes of the collapse, we will start to see the new system being completely released. Even right now, stablecoins are making up trillions and trillions of dollars in volume year over year, even during the darkest times of crypto. So when we think about, digitalization and even tokenization, the biggest players out there, BlackRock, Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, Wisdom Tree, you even have State Street on board. Vanguard is starting to have discussions around this as well. Wall Street and the financial giants of the world are now ready to take on, blockchain and tokenization firsthand. Even NASDAQ has stated, listen, we want to have 24/5 trading and eventually 24/7 trading. And they even highlighted the fact that if they tap into blockchain, it is something that is possible. So again, you can clearly see the warning signs right now that we're, ushering into a new system, but we don't get there without major accelerants. Sanctions were a big one. The trade war is just another one. We are starting to see a big accelerant happening with the trade war discussions, which is accelerating the push towards a big global event, which will be that big boom event to really kind of get the new system rolling. And I think that we're already starting to see the beginning stages with legislation around stablecoins, around digital assets. We now have this it's a complete 180 that happened in just a few weeks ever since the election, where everyone is now talking about how this admin is so pro crypto and all these great things are happening around Congress and the SEC, and it's all happening at a perfect time because we're accelerating everything towards the digital system. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.